Hello everybody. So we are moving now to question 6 on our funding formula worksheet. And in order to do question 6, we're going to have to kind of take a step back and look at the funding formula backwards. And you'll understand what I mean as we go through this process. So let us then start here. So when the state of Oklahoma starts to fund schools, the state calculates the funding formula as if the state is one large district. Therefore, all money available for funding must be identified, and the sums of all the various aspects of the formula have to be calculated. So what happens here is, remember early on when we talked about the fact that the Constitution gives the legislature the power to create the Department of Ed. So the Department of Ed is an entity then. And what happens is the Department of Ed submits a budget every year to the legislature and says, this is what we need. The legislature then looks at that and actually allocates money to the Department of Education. And so then the Department of Education takes that and figures the two incentive aids that we talked about, the two main things, the foundation's incentive aid and the salary incentive aid. And we looked at those factors, and I told you those factors change every year. We're going to see why those factors change every year. And the transportation aid factor at 1.39 in theory could change every year, but it doesn't, okay? But we're going to pull transportation out of this. We only want to look at the foundation aid and the salary incentive aid. And so the way the state does this is they take the total budget. So when you think of your funding formula page, we're going to start with the total state aid and work backwards. Okay? And that's what the state does basically to get this foundation aid and the salary incentive aid factors. So if you remember then, we have to determine the weighted ADM because we have that for each individual school. So we need to look at the weighted ADM for the whole state. And then we have to figure the local and intermediate revenues. Okay, we haven't used the word intermediate, but that's really what it is. Because we know from the foundation aid side of the formula that those things are subtracted from the foundation aid. And so what we're going to do then is we're going to act like all of our districts represent the whole state. All 5 of our districts represent the whole state. And we're going to look at this and determine how the state comes up with the aid factors that we use. So the way we need to do this, and you're going to have to work this on your own now, these 5 districts that I have are not the same that you have. Okay, so please do not use these 5 districts. These are just made up districts here to illustrate a point. But what you're going to have to do is determine the ad valorem that you get for each district. And so here you can see I've picked this up. This is that number you're going to put in the funding formula where it says adjusted valuation times 15 mils, and then it has a blank, and then it has times 0.015. Well, what you put in that blank is the ad valorem we want. Okay, we don't want the 15 mils of it. We want the total ad valorem. So in theory, then we can say we've done this for these districts, and the total ad valorem for these 5 districts comes out to a little over 73 million. The weighted ADM, you have figured the weighted ADM also for all your districts. So you're simply going to add that up, and in my theoretical districts I've done that, and I come out with a total weighted ADM of 5,690.08. And then the state dedicated funds. You will also take that and add those together, and for my theoretical districts we have a little over $1.8 million. So this is what the state is going to generate on its own as far as ad valorem and state dedicated funds. And so now let's go and look at our state aid sheet. So this is the sheet with which you've been working now for the last few weeks. You can see a few things highlighted here. The foundation aid factor and the salary incentive aid factor at the top and bottom are the two numbers we're going to determine. We're going to pull out the transportation though, because transportation is not going to be a part of these factors because they're not impacted by millages. And you'll understand that in a minute too, okay? So that's why in question 5, I had you pull out the total state aid and then subtract transportation from that. So that number in question 5 is what we'll begin with. Actually, I'm going to give everybody the same exact number at the end of this presentation. Okay. So when we pull out transportation, then our sheet looks like this. And so you can see I simply cut out transportation there. So we know some things. If we were to go back a couple of screens, we're going to plug in these numbers here now that you have added up from your districts, that you've been adding up in questions, for questions 1, 2, and 3. And 4, I guess, too. So let's input these numbers. We know our total weighted ADM in the state. In my theoretical district is 5690.08. So I'm going to put that at the top in the foundation aid. And I'm going to put it at the bottom in the salary incentive aid. We also added the total adjusted valuation for the state in my 5 districts. And that came out to a little over 73 million. So we're going to put that in the top in the foundation aid, and we're going to put it in the bottom in the salary incentive aid. Now we can do something without necessarily doing any terrible math yet. It's really not terrible math. We know where it says 75% of the 4 mil levy. Well, we know we can figure the 4 mil levy here because all we have to do to get the 4 mil levy is multiply our total adjusted valuation times 0.004. And that's going to come out to $292,299. And we know what our total state dedicated funds for all districts, and in theory the whole state, that came out to a little over 1.8 million. So we know these things, and we can figure these things simply by adding up what the state is. Keep in mind, we have to know how many students there are in the whole state, how much money there is available in the whole state, and how much local revenue is going to be generated in the whole state. Because we have to subtract that local revenue from foundation aid. And from there, we're going to work backwards and find out what our new foundation aid factors are. Okay? So, to make things simple, if you look at the bottom here, we're going to say that the total state money for the new year is going to be $10 million. Okay? So we're going to start with $10 million. In other words, we're going to say that the legislature has given the State Department $10 million to spend on Common Ed. So now let's start working backwards to figure out the things that we don't know. Okay? So, one thing I want to point out here to you is notice that in the top we have 15 mils in our foundation aid side of the formula. And in the bottom we have 20 mils. So we have a total of 35 mils in property taxes that go toward education. In other words, what we have is that we have 3/7 of our millage in the top and 4/7 in the bottom. Okay, so our total meals are 35 meals, and 15 of that would be 15 from 35. It's going to leave us 20. So that's how we get 3 up top, 4 down bottom. Okay, it's simple math, reducing the 3/7 in the top, 4/7 in the bottom. So to make this simple, 3/7 of anything is simply doing a math calculation. How do we get 3/7 of 100? Okay, and I wrote it out here. 3/7 equals x over 100. How do we solve for x? You just cross multiply and then divide. So 3 times 100 equals 300. And then 300 divided by 7 equals 42.86. So therefore, 3/7, it says 4/7, it should say, well, no, I take it back. So our x then is 4286. So 4286 is 3/7 of 100. So therefore, 4/7 would simply be 100 minus the 4286, or 57.14. Okay, it's just cross multiplying to get our 3/7 and 4/7. And again, we do this because we have the meals divided up into 3/7 of the meals go to the top and 4/7 at the bottom. And over the last 30 years, the funding formula has typically fallen that 3/7 of the total budget is given out in the foundation aid and 4/7 is given out in the salary incentive aid. And so that's why we're going to work this backwards. So if you do that with our state budget here of $10 million, 3/7 of 10 million, in other words, 3 times 10 million, 30 million divided by 7 comes out to $4,285,714.29. So that is our total foundation aid, is a little over 4.285 million. So if that's 3/7, then we know that in order to get 4/7 of this, we just subtract the 4.285 million from 10 million, and it gives us $5,714,285.71. Or you could do the math. 4 times 10 million is 40 million, divided by 7 comes out to 5.714 million. So now we're getting a little further in our calculations. So let's start working backwards here. Okay, we're going to do our salary incentive aid side first. So in order to get line 5, it says we had to take step C times 20 mils. And that's going to come out to 5.714 million. Well, we actually did not multiply by 20 mils, but we multiplied by 20 to get that, if you remember. So we're going to do just the opposite. So in order to go up to step C, we're going to divide by 20. So 5.714 million divided by 20, we're just working algebra backwards, comes out to $285,714.29. For step B, we can simply just do that as normal. The $73 million of our adjusted valuation divided by 1,000 is $73,074.71. Now, in order to get the answer in C, notice what it said we had to do. A minus B equals C. So therefore, C plus B is going to equal A, and that's what we did to get it. Okay, so we added the 285 plus the 73, and we come out to $358,789. In order to get that, we had to multiply our incentive aid factor times our weighted ADM. We're going to do the opposite. So in order to get our incentive aid factor, we need to divide our total by our WADM, and this will give us an incentive aid factor for this district or this state of 6305. Okay, so that's how you get the bottom number, the incentive aid factor in the bottom half of the formula. Now let's move to the top half of the formula. Well, let's do the math that we can do easily across. So if you look up here where it says adjusted valuation times the 15 mills, again, this is our total adjusted valuation for the whole state, all districts, multiply times 0.015 or 15 mills, and we get a little over $1 million. We can take 75% of our 4 mil levy, which we had already determined. So 292,299 times 0.75 is 219,2415. Now we can add our total chargeables. We just need to add these three things together, and our chargeables come out to $3,137,497.85. Now, we're going to do the same thing we did at the bottom at the top. The way we got our foundation aid total is we subtracted line 1 from line 2 to get line 3. Well, if we want to know what line was originally, we need to add line 2 to line 3, and it's going to tell us that our original foundation aid total then was $7.423 million. And again, just as we did down here, our foundation aid factor times our weighted ADM gets us that 7.4 million. So in order to figure out what our foundation aid factor is, we need to divide. So 7.423 million divided by 5,690 equals 1304.58. So this is our foundation aid factor. So you can see then how the state determines its budget every year. The department submits a request in the spring to the legislature. The legislature, usually toward the last day, sends out the budget. The budget's approved and signed by the governor. The State Department then knows the money it's going to get. The State Department then puts everything together in a computer and figures out what the weighted ADM should be, what the adjusted valuation is going to be at the end of the year, what the county levy is, what the state dedicated funds are. All those things go into the formula. The year ends in June. The new year, calendar year, fiscal year starts July 1. By July 1, the state has the new foundation aid and salary incentive aid factors, and everybody is given their allotments based on the projections that they had for their district. And starting August 1, districts start getting money based upon the new factors. You can see how these factors change every year. Now, the big thing here is that October 1 account. What the October 1 count does is it solidifies everything. So the idea here is, if you think about it, the state knows the money that they're getting, but the actual enrollment numbers are not solid numbers because the academic year hadn't even started yet. The district is making these predictions during the summer. So it's that October 1 count that solidifies what the real weighted ADM is. And based upon that, the state will go back and make some adjustments. And then in December, at the end of December, schools get what is called the mid-year adjustment. And if you either went over or under a little bit, those adjustments are put into the calendar, okay? So that's the basic idea of what you need to do for question 6 when I say you're going to work the formula backwards. For question 6, I want you to come up with a new foundation aid and a new and salary incentive aid total for these districts. Okay, so let's look at a couple of things here. Okay, so for question 6, what we're going to do is this. Whatever you put as your answer in question 5, everybody's going to use the same number. Okay, so forget what you put. I want everybody to start with the same number. So for question 6 then, when it says, what is the total state aid? We're going to start with 24,473,132.51. Now what question 6 is going to do is we're going to pretend the state has come in and said that next year there is going to be a cut in education. And we're going to cut 10%. So the first thing you need to do then for question 6, in working the formula backwards, is you need to take 10% out of the total state aid. So I'm giving you the total state aid here. So that bottom line on question 6 then, instead of putting $10 million like I did in this presentation, you're going to start with the answer to number 5 minus 10%. And I'm telling you the answer to number 5 needs to be $24,473,132.51. No matter what you put, I want everybody to use that. So the first thing you're going to do then is take 10% out of that, and that's going to be our new state budget for education. And then here's where there's a mistake on the paper. The paper says there is a 5% cut. Okay, I want you to see what cuts do. So instead of 5%, I want you to change it to 10%. Okay, and that's what I just said. I want you to take 10% out of that 24 million, and that's what you're going to start with as the total state aid at the bottom of the state aid formula. And then you're going to work backwards to find the new salary incentive aid and the foundation aid. Okay? So that last part may be confusing. Feel free to ask questions. We're just working it backwards, and I want you to see what happens when the state cuts money. All right?